Hello and welcome to Hexed Encountered. My name is Joe. Today I'm going to be doing a first look at the game Carrier Battle Philippine Sea, designed by Jon Southard and published by Compass Games. So this game covers, as you might guess from the title, the massive carrier battle that took place in the Philippine Sea in 1944 during the invasion of Saipan. It ended up being the largest carrier battle in history. Obviously, it was the largest carrier battle of the Second World War, and nothing since has occurred, of course. So, this was a big one, and as you might expect, this is a somewhat complex game, covering as it does such a massive battle. It is also a solitaire game, where you basically manage the United States naval forces, and the game system handles the Japanese naval forces. So, what's in the box? We'll do that first, and then we'll talk about a little bit about how the game works. And down the road, I'll be doing a playthrough. But for now, let's see what's in the box here. So we'll get some baggies and one 10-sided die. We have our rule book. Now, as I mentioned, it's kind of a beefy rule book here, 59 pages. Now, the last pages are kind of, like bibliography, some design notes, etc. Now, the interesting thing about this game is, if you remember when I did the first look at the Skies Above Britain game, I went through all of the programmed learning, essentially, the way the game manual kind of taught you how to play the game. This works in a very similar way, not exactly the same, but very similar. There are 5 training missions. So the way it works is you read through the basics, right? We have our introduction, game equipment, etc., sequence of play, U.S. air missions. And there's a lot about that, as you can see. And then when you reach this area right here where it says, don't get waved off at this point, please play scenario 1 found in the playbook. So you read 12 pages, not too bad. You play the first scenario. Then you come back and you get air and sea combat. You start introducing things about the Japanese combat air patrol, AA fire, air to ship, all this stuff, Japanese air raid attack. Then we get another one. So you read 4 more pages and you can do scenario 2 and so on. So you get the idea, right? Here's scenario 3. So you continue to add pieces of the gameplay. And, it's a good way to learn a game like this one, which is fairly complex as compared to a lot of other solitaire games. Much in the way that Skies Above Britain, that game, you could say that game is somewhat complex because there are various subsystems, and this is somewhat similar as well, in that you have different types of operations that are occurring, and so you have different systems that you manage in different ways. And it all comes together into a coherent and cohesive whole, but you have a lot of little things to remember and manage along the way. So that's why you get this. Very, very good way to do this, in my opinion. So then we have the playbook. And the playbook, as you might guess, has our scenarios, right? So here you see Task Force 58. This is what you will be managing in the game. You get a comprehensive example of how to play the game, and then your introductory scenarios. These are the learning scenarios. Hey Rube, get the carriers, turkey shoot, enemy fleet sighted, and the Battle of June 20th, which was the second day of the battle. Then your standard scenarios are day 1 of the battle, day 2 of the battle, and then there's some kind of alternate history, what if kind of scenarios here for other things that you could do. And this great carrier battle of the Pacific actually features ships that were sunk in earlier battles that you could bring back and have them take part in this. So, you do have all your scenarios in here. It explains, this is scenario 1 setup, so you can see where you put your forces, how many turns, how, the air points you need for victory. Sorry. Tripping over my tongue there. Explains how you set up for scenario 2, etc. It's pretty much what you would expect in a playbook, right? The scenarios. And we have some player aids, and there are a lot of these. So let's get them out here. So that one's kind of special. We'll leave that one for last. So you have card 1, front and back, right? So this has your air-to-air combat table, the Japanese air-to-air combat table. And you might say, well, why are these different? The game, basically, it handles the asymmetrical forces, the relative sizes of U.S. Carrier squadrons as opposed to Japanese carrier squadrons. The Americans had more aircraft, so their table is different from the Japanese table. Now, there's a little bit more to it. That's an oversimplification, but that's basically the idea. So you have a lot of charts here, and you can see it. It covers fuel expenditure, the intercept range, safe return to the carrier, the limitations for carriers, both fleet carriers and light carriers. On the Japanese side, I remember reading that the light carriers kind of cover anything that's not a fleet carrier, because the Japanese had a lot of various classes of ships that they basically threw a flight deck upon and made into an aircraft carrier. You have an air search table. A big part of any kind of carrier battle game has to deal with the fog of war and the fact that these ships did not know where the other ships were. They did not know they did not know what the composition of the enemy fleets. They didn't know, what was out there. There were false sightings. There was radar, but radar would only tell you had airplanes coming in. And so you didn't know what they were, how large of a force it was. This was the very early days of radar as well. So now we have card 2, front and back, anti-aircraft fire, air attack die rolls, air attack damage, the cap strength for the Japanese, the combat air patrol, the fighters that defend the fleet, they fly over the carriers. The escort fighters, these are the ones that fly with the strike aircraft when they're going out hunting the enemy, etc. Air raid generation, strength, etc., etc. Lot of information, a lot of tables. Intelligence table, right? You roll to kind of figure out what the force is comprised of. There are 5 different levels of intelligence, starting at 0 and going up to 4. The known air strength, there's all kinds of stuff here, as you can see, and this is why it uses programmed instruction. Air raid strength for aircraft coming from Guam, because Guam had not been captured when they were fighting this battle. The invasion of Saipan was underway, and Guam followed Saipan, as did Tinian. So, by that time, Guam still had its airfield active, and, aircraft were available to assist in the hunt for the American fleet. This battle was the last battle in which the Japanese fleet sortied out in search of, a decisive battle with the Americans. After their loss in this battle, they basically kind of gave up the hope of decisively defeating the U.S. Navy, via traditional tactics, and they started to employ kamikaze tactics instead. Submarine stuff, right? The U.S. had submarines at this battle that played a pretty critical role in the battle. So you have a card, you have tables for those on the card. Card 4 back, these are some cool pictures on here. All these planes stacked on the deck. If a strike came in and hit a carrier with all these planes stacked on the deck, that was bad news. And then we have a game turn flow chart where everything's laid out and how it works. This is just one-sided. Then we have the air raid flow chart with step-by-steps, and it's literally a flow chart. Just like this one, it says flow chart, but as a computer guy, I don't see your directionals and all here, but here you do. Yes, no, logic branches, right? Japanese movement priorities. You'll see on the game board when we look at that, there are little ship symbols with numbers that determine how the Japanese, the direction in which the Japanese move, because you have to have a system, since it's a programmed AI type system, to handle how the Japanese ships move. So that's related to this. Then we have our counters. We'll talk about those in a minute. Well, let's do it right now. So I haven't broken the seal on these yet, as you can see, but we do have here the the Japanese ships. So most of the capital ships, your carriers, your battleships, they will have their own counters. Cruisers, destroyers, they're more grouped in like forces. So cruiser force, destroyer force, etc. Then you have land, air, naval air. The Japanese aircraft types aren't kind of delineated. They're just Japanese air strength points, basically. So in your head, you'll have to think about vowels and all that stuff, zeros, etc., because they're more generic. Now, the Americans, theirs is more specific. So there are 3 sheets of counters in here. There are plenty of unboxing videos of this game, so if you do want to see what the counters look like, I would just say go check them out. Now here's the board, and it's fairly large, and it is mounted, which is nice. So I'm going to slide some of that stuff down, and we're going to open this up, and you can get a kind of a gander at what the board looks like, at least partially. So here is the board, right? So here you can see kind of the various zones, right? Sorry, the camera's shaking a little bit. I'm banging the table here. But you can see, so these are the ships that I was talking about with the numbers, right? 1 to 5, you roll your 10-sider. If it's 1 to 5, they go this way. If you're 6 to 10, they go this way, etc. These zones indicate basically where, this is zone 1. You roll your 10-sided die, and that'll tell you which one of these spots the Japanese force will be in. Same thing, zone 2, zone 3, and zone 4 is at the bottom. Over here, we have, it's a little bit harder to see. Let me slide this over some. So here, you can see these 4 boxes right here. So these are the task groups, 4 of the 5 task groups that comprised Task Force 58. So Task Force 58 was under Mitcher, I believe, and he was under Spruance, and then they had 5 groups under there. Task Group 58-1. So 58-1, 2, 3, and 4 were the carrier groups. So they're going to have places for their cap, the ships in the screening force. They'll tell you who the admiral commanding was. Then you have different statuses for your flight decks, for your various carriers. You have, so that's basically what this does. Task group, the other 5th one was the surface group, the battle line group with the battleships and so on in it. No carriers. So these are going to be your carriers, and you can see 4 groups with 4 carriers each. So that's 16 carriers in here that you're going to have. And here's the battle line right there, 58-7 under Admiral Ching Lee. And there are other boxes, and you have your air. You'll track your air missions up here on the top. Here's a box for Guam, Japanese ships that are sunk and exited, the Guam air raid fighters and attack aircraft. You have a general records track and so on over here. You can also see there's a game turn track with the hours, and then Japanese arrival table, what zone based on the die roll, etc. So that's the board. And then you also have this, which is more of a track for the Japanese. So the Japanese groups were called butais, and you have 6 of them. And so they will have their own way of tracking everything, and you'll track all 6 butais on this separate card, which is kind of, you can place it adjacent to the map or so on and so forth. So that pretty much covers the game. Let me slide this back in so we have something to look at. So that basically covers the game, and I wanted to keep this relatively short. There are tons of unboxing videos out there. Mine isn't anything special. I just wanted to kind of do one because I did want to look at this game. I did want to show this game because I do think this is a pretty interesting game. And, the Pacific War, as you probably already know, I've said this several times, is an area of special interest for me. So that is going to wrap it up. As always, thank you for watching. please consider liking, sharing, and or subscribing. If you would, that would be greatly appreciated. So yeah, my name is Joe. This is Hexed Encountered, and until next time, happy gaming.